Hey Harvest, thanks so much for joining us today as we continue our Fruit Inspector series. If we're watching, wherever you're watching from, whenever you're watching, thank you so much. We'd love if you'd click the subscribe button here and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Follow, like our pages. We'd love to keep you up to date on all the latest information. You also go to harvest247.org. And we have a Behind the Harvest podcast. We talk about theology. We have roundtable discussions, interviews. We bring people behind the scenes of church planting. You can get that on Google Play and on iTunes. We would love for you to check it out, plug in there, and hear about some behind the scenes of Harvest. We exist so that all people may know Jesus and grow with Him. And this year, our theme is Inside Out. We want to put the mirror on our heart and on the inside so we can grow closer with Jesus, so that it will spill on the outside so we can reach more people for Christ. And so we are doing the Fruit Inspectors series, and today we're going to talk about our first fruit of the Spirit, and that is love. Now, if I say, I love you, or I were to use the word love, I have one word to really describe like 3 or 4 different relationships and feelings. Okay, so if I say to my wife, Sarah, I love you, it means I love her physically, affectionately, sacrificially, and unconditionally. So in one word, there's like 4 or 5 different things that she has to discern. What am I saying love for? And a lot of times that's context. She'll say, oh, okay, you love me this way and this way and this way, but I got one word. If I were to say to my boys, hey, I love you, I've got one word to tell them, hey, I love you unconditionally, I love you sacrificially, and I love you affectionately. If I were to talk to my parents, I use the word love, right? And I'd say to my parents, I love you, and that means I love them from a family devotions perspective. I love them unconditionally, right? And so I got one word to describe some different relationships. My friends, if I say, hey, I love you, it means that I love them, kind of from an affectionate standpoint or from a devotion standpoint. But I got one word to describe several different types of relationships and what those relationships mean. And it's up to the context and to the person to discern that or to figure that out. And you're the same way. I mean, if you're an English-speaking person, which I would imagine most of you are, you've got one word to communicate those feelings, those emotions, the value of those relationships, and all of the things that are kind of embedded into those relationships. When you say, I love you to a parent, it means something different than if you say, I love you to a spouse or a significant other. If you say, I love you as a boyfriend, girlfriend, or someone engaged, it might mean something different than when you are married. And so that's just kind of what we have. Scripturally, though, we actually don't have that. In the Greek language, we actually have 3 words to describe kind of one feeling or to describe love, but it helps us break up what do we actually mean, or what does someone actually mean when they say those words. And so it's a little bit easier. So I just want to go through these just really quickly. 3 kinds of love found in the Greek language. The first is eros. It refers to a sexual or physical love. It is commonly used in the Greek-speaking world of the New Testament. The word itself is not found in the New Testament, but the concept of love, however, is expressed in the context of marriage between a man and a woman in Scripture. You can see that 1 Corinthians 7:5, Hebrews 13:4. So when you think about eros, when I think about eros, we're talking about that physical, sexual love in the context of marriage. Number 2 is philos, and this is more of an affectionate and friendship and familial type of love. This is used in reference to family and friendships. For example, in Matthew 10:37, Jesus indicates his love for mother and father and son and daughter, or it is used to indicate that. Philos was the word Jesus used for his friend Lazarus in John 11:3 and John 11:36. His love for his disciple that was used in John 20 and verse 2. So when you hear philos, this is more of like a friendship, affection, familial type of love. And the final one is agape. Now, agape is the word that is used to kind of communicate the sacrificial and unconditional love of God. In the Greek-speaking world of the New Testament, agape is not used very much. In fact, agape wasn't used until the writing of the New Testament, and therefore it is understood as this unique description of the nature of God's love for us and for His Son, Jesus. And so it's not the words used in the Greek-speaking world of the first century. So when we talk about agape, it's different from eros and philos because the original kind of context for that word and where it was predominantly used was in the pages of Scripture to describe the unconditional and sacrificial love of God. We see this pop up in John 3:16 when it says, God so loved the world, He so sacrificially and unconditionally, He so agape'd the world that He gave His only Son, right? So this kind of action, like this is the type of love that's a verb. It's a love that's sacrificial. It's unconditional. We see it in John 13:34. When Jesus gives the commandment, He says, look, a new commandment I give to you, that you agape one another or love one another just as I have agape'd you or loved you, you are also to agape or love one another. He's saying, look, love is an actionable feeling or emotion. And the way that I've loved you is sacrificially and unconditionally, and that's how I'm asking you to love others. I'm giving you a model for how to love other people. I'm telling you and showing you what that's going to look like, and as a matter of fact, that's what I'm asking you and calling you to do, is to love others unconditionally and also sacrificially. So we've got eros, which is kind of that intimate, physical love. We've got philos, which is that friendship, familial kind of affection. And then we've got agape, which is the sacrificial, unconditional love of God that is kind of spilled out into Scripture. And so we see this word used in one spot in 1 Corinthians 13. And I would venture to say that most people associate love and the Bible with this passage of Scripture, 1 Corinthians 13. It's the love chapter, right? It's read at weddings, it's put on, pictures, and we have it in our house and all those things. Well, it might come to no shock to you, or it might come to a shock to you that actually when the Apostle Paul writes to the church at Corinth, and he's writing 1 Corinthians 13, he's actually not talking or referencing marriage or that at all. In fact, what he is doing is he's kind of talking to a church at Corinth that was hyper fixated on super spiritual gifts, namely tongues and prophecy. So Paul is saying to the church, he's saying, look, you guys are hyper fixated on these supernatural gifts of the Spirit, prophecy and tongues. But I'm just going to pause right here between chapter 12 and between chapter 14. I'm going to pause as I'm having this kind of conversation with you about the gifts of the Spirit. And I'm going to put right in the middle of this idea that if you don't have love, if you don't have agape, if love isn't actionable and sacrificial and unconditional love of God and modeled after that, it doesn't matter what gifts you possess. It doesn't matter how gifted you are. It doesn't matter how sensational the spiritual gift is. It doesn't matter. Because people are going to know us, believers, followers of Jesus, by how we love other people. And we want to be able to maximize our love for other people, but our love for other people can only be maximized if it's tied back to the one who loved us first, whom is God, and the one who loved us the most completely, who is God, and the one who modeled agape first, sacrificial and unconditional love, God. And so Paul takes this idea of love, and he says, look, if you're doing all this ministry, you're doing these spiritual gifts, you're trying to do all of these things, and you possess love, you possess agape, because that's the word used in 1 Corinthians 13, this is what that's going to look like. This is what people are going to see. This is what people are going to experience if you are doing all of these things, living your life with the agape, sacrificial, unconditional love of God. And he says this is it. In 1 Corinthians 13, verse 4, love, agape, is patient and kind. Love, agape, does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist in its own way. Because you can't love someone sacrificially and then say, yeah, but it's got to be my way. Sacrificially means I'm giving up my way so that I can love you. It isn't irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice with wrongdoing, but it rejoices with the truth. Love, agape, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Agape love never ends. It never ends. And so Paul kind of says, look, if you're going to love people the way that God loved you, and you're going to love people the way that Jesus tells you to love people, it's going to look like that. It's going to be patient. It's going to be kind. It's not going to boast. It's not going to envy. It's not going to be arrogant. It's not going to insist on its own way. It's not going to be resentful or irritable. It's not going to rejoice in wrongdoing. It's going to rejoice with the truth. And here's the thing. It's going to bear all things. It's going to hope all things, believe all things, and endure all things. It's never going to end. And so there's kind of three truths that I want to share about this type of love of God. But I want to say this. What this is saying, and what Paul is writing to us is saying this, is that when we love God the most, we will love others the best. When we agape God and love Him the way He loves us, we're going to love other people the best. Because He's the source of the actionable, self-sacrificial, unconditional type of love. Like, I'm just going to be honest with you. We can love other people, eros, physically and sexually, void of God. That we can do that. We can love other people and have some affection for them, void of God. Like Philos. We can. Oh, I love you, friend. I love you, mom. I love you, dad. I love you. We can do that void of God. We cannot sacrificially and unconditionally love people. We cannot agape people void of God. So it takes us loving God the most so that we can channel that agape love and love other people the best, because that's exactly what Jesus calls us to do. He says, in the same way I've loved you, you're to love others. And so when we love God the most, we'll love other people the best. And so a couple of things that I want to share, a couple truths with you about this love. When we talk about agape love being the highest form of love, it is not saying that eros and philos, the other types of love, are insignificant or trivial. God created sexual love, eros, to be expressed in marriage between a man and a woman, husbands and wives. And He also created us to be connected, philos, with friends and with family. That's community. If you're watching this in a Harvest home right now, we're hopeful, I'm hopeful, that you are a part of a community, a home, a gathering, a group of people that you have some philos for. You're developing that affection for. So by saying that agape is the highest form, we're not trivializing the others. We're not saying they're not insignificant. But what we are saying is that when Jesus calls us to love others like He loves us, when the love of God is described in Scripture, when it's shown how it's going to be manifest, the word used is agape. Because it's an actionable, decisive type of love that says, I'm gonna love you sacrificially, I'm going to love you unconditionally. And that means, it doesn't mean what I'm getting in return, and it doesn't mean what you do to me. I'm still going to love you. And it reminds us that when we love God the most, we're going to love other people the best. When we are able to reciprocate that agape love to God, we're going to love other people the best, because He's going to be the source of love. He's going to be the example that we are sharing with the world. Second thing is this, is that all genuine love comes from God because God is love. A biblical definition of love must begin with God. Whether it's romantic, between husband and wife, the bond of friends, that genuine love, that sacrificial love, God is love. That's 1 John 4:16. So if God is love, then we love others best by loving Him the most. It's exactly what I've been saying. When we love God the most, we'll love others the best. Or when we love others the best by loving Him the most. And so it's tied to that. And Paul, when he's writing in 1 Corinthians, he's saying to the church, look, you can do some amazing stuff. You can show people some amazing things. You can possess all the gifts that you want to. You can do all the ministry in His name. You can be all of that. But if you don't possess this agape love, this self-sacrificing, unconditional love like God has possessed for you and has modeled for you, it means absolutely nothing. If you are someone that has accomplished so many things in your life, but you've never sacrificed for somebody else, you've never agape'd them, I'm going to just tell you, it don't matter. It doesn't matter. So when we love God the most, we love others the best. And the third thing is this, is followers of Christ are to be known by the way that they love. John 13:34 and 35, Jesus commanded His followers, and this is exactly what He said. He said, just as I have loved you, just as I've agape'd you, you are also to love one another. Agape them. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another, if you agape one another. It is agape. It's the pattern of love that is patterned after God. And so the pattern of our love is this, as I have loved you. The pattern of our love, the example of our love is Jesus saying, as I have agape'd you, as I have unconditionally loved you, as I have sacrificed for you, you are to agape others. You're to love them unconditionally. You're supposed to sacrifice for them. And that's what Paul is saying too. If you want to do things, if you want to live your life for Jesus, if you want other people to know that you're living your life for Jesus, it's simple. Love others as He has loved you. Love Him the most, and you'll be able to love others the best. So if God is love and God is agape, let's just change some words here in 1 Corinthians 13. Why don't we do this? Why don't we change it and say, God is patient and kind. God does not envy or boast. God is not arrogant or rude. He does not insist on His way. Jesus modeled this for us in the garden when He said, let this cup pass from me. Basically, give me another way to do what you need me to do other than the cross. But if not, your will be done, not my will be done. God is not irritable or resentful. God does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but He rejoices with the truth. God bears all things. God believes all things. God hopes all things. God endures all things. God never ends. He was there at the beginning. He will be there at the end, and He never changes. And so when we talk about the first spiritual fruit, love, yes, there's eros, and yes, there's philos, and yes, we need those. And the model form of love is the self-sacrificing, unconditional love, agape, that describes the love of God for us that we are to love others with. Because when we love Him the most, we're going to love others the best. God bless you.